Hello, welcome to this short video tutorial. This is just going to overview a 30-mark education question and answer. This student has picked this from a past exam question bank from a previous exam series which went out a 20 mark, but we'll have a little bit of a look and see where would it grade on as if it was out of 30 marker. Okay, so just in front of you, you can see the questions asking you apply the material from the item and your knowledge, evaluate the view that working class underachievement is the result of home circumstances and family background. This is likely in a new style 30-mark question. It's a little bit of a double parter, so we're looking for home circumstances and family background and being able to evaluate that as well. Okay, now the item is given to you as you can see above. And that is useful for giving you tips and prompts that you can use to explore, and it keeps you on task as well. This student, as you see as I go through it, does use the item to structure his answer quite a bit, which might be something that you might want to do when you are answering. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at his answer then. Okay, so this student, he starts off by arguing that some sociologists might argue that home background is got great significance to working class underachievement. I would suggest that it's really important that when you're talking about either working class or middle class, you are suggesting specifically that working class are underachieving or they are failing, and suggest that middle class are high achievers, and being very specific in the way that you talk about them. Now, this first paragraph is quite a nice introductory paragraph because what the student does, he identifies that home circumstance and family background is referring to both cultural deprivation, okay, tell you what, I'll highlight that, and also material deprivation. Okay, so he gets a bit of theory in there at the beginning. He does give a little bit of a nudge and a couple of keywords in there as well, because he identifies that cultural deprivation is referring to, for example, speech codes, and he does mention about material deprivation, about the lack of books as well. Okay, now I'm not expecting him to go into detail about this because this is just an introduction. And then the student also recognises that this is a debatey type question because it's asking you to evaluate the view that it is only just home circumstances and family background. So this student is identifying in the intro that there is a however, that there are factors within school that might influence working class underachievement. Okay, now what I would have liked to have seen is that teachers labelling and the factors that occur within school are often a result of home circumstances, that often that they are interlinked really, and a better student would be able to suggest that, and that's what I would like to have seen. But overall, this is a nice introduction to an answer. It, starts off quite strong, and it does recognise that there is going to be a level of evaluation in there as well. Okay, now like what I was just talking about, how this student uses the item, he does it quite a few times. Okay, so we've got the item there. Okay, so he's picked out that it's the working class homes with fewer books is the lack of stimulated environment. And he's linked that into this inadequate primary socialisation that the working class are undergoing. He then links it into, for example, Douglas, that working class children score lower in tests. This is because the parents are less likely to support their intellectual development. So again, it's applying a key word. And this may be because the working class, they might not have time to do it. They might work long hours. And that it's in comparison who can afford to do this. Okay, additionally, he's got a different study there. Bernstein and Young suggest that middle class mothers are more likely to choose toys that are encouraging reasoning skills and preparation for school. Okay, so he's got a lot of knowledge there. He's developed it from the item. He's got a decent explanation. What I would have liked to have seen is a level of maybe analysis or even evaluation, where you could be suggesting what impact might this have on what happens when the child arrives at school, age 4. There is a clear difference between middle class and working class kids. How might that impact teacher labelling, for example, based on the way that their ability? Does the teacher will have high expectations or low expectations? And this would encourage you to evaluate this viewpoint. Okay. He picks out from the item as well a little bit of an analysis that Sure Start is a policy that has been aimed to tackle this lack of intellectual development that he's talked about in the previous paragraph. So there's a little bit of analysis there, but what I would have liked to have seen here is that he's bringing it back to the question there. It's sort of like a bit of a bolt-on point here, and I would have liked to have seen the student to then say, okay, is it just home background, and does the government have to intervene with home background, because that sort of suggests that that is the bigger part of the problem compared to what's happening within school. So a link back to the question would have been good there. Then he starts to use the item again, so it starts in the next block of information, or the next explanation, which is the speech codes. And then he links it with a study, Bernstein, talking about what the working class speech code is. It's restricted, he's explained what it is. He's used a bit of analysis by comparing it to middle class and explanations there. And then he's got a little bit about the impact to why they are failing within school. So he's linking it into achievements, which is what I would expect students to do. Okay, now what he does do here is have this, however, that teachers have this expectation of an ideal pupil. Now, I would encourage you to not fall into this trap where you think that you are evaluating the point, but in fact you're just giving an opposing viewpoint. Examiners call this a bit of a juxtaposition. You're not actually evaluating here, you're just giving an opposing view or another view. Okay, so what I would have liked to have seen here is that there is this view that once in school teachers have a speech hierarchy and that they value middle class speech a lot more than they value working class speech, and if you want to go a little bit broader, you can suggest that black speech is graded the lowest. Which could actually influence, and that it's not the fact that they are culturally deprived in the language sense, it's the fact that schools do not value working class speech, and actually schools fail children for not teaching them to use their speech correctly, so it's actually the school's fault. That would be appropriate analysis, appropriate evaluation. However, this student does try to bring in what's happening within the school context. Okay, so he drifts a little bit here because he talks about this expectation of the ideal pupil, suggesting that it is more important than the home background. But I would like to see, how do these interlink? So, for example, home background does influence the way that teachers view the ideal pupil. If he'd have made that connection, that would have scored him a little bit higher marks. Okay, he does mention here about the elaborate code the teachers will admire, the working class pupils are furthest away, and I would have elaborated on this point here as a decent evaluation to the point here that is made. Okay. Then he uses the item again. Again, he's using it to structure his answer about expectations, linking it into a study, Douglas, less interest in their education, less likely to attend parents' evening or whatever, discuss their work, lack of encouragement. And then we've got this evaluation here. He's suggesting that it's too deterministic, that working class aren't ambitious. Okay, little bit of an explanation about different types of parents. I would like to have seen that applied a little bit more sensitively to the point that he's been made about not being able to give motivation and encouragement to their children, and lack of cultural capital. Okay, and then he's got the material deprivation, which again he identified in the intro, and a little bit about why they are less likely to achieve in school. Okay, he's missed a little bit of a trick here. He could have outlined a little bit more about what material deprivation is and why does that cause underachievement, housing, diet, illness, cramped conditions, not being able to concentrate, which means that they might miss things in class. Okay. He goes on to talk about being debt averse. It's talking a bit more about attitudes and values here, more likely to be concerned with the cost, not going, whereas middle class students are more debt tolerant. Then he's got the actual poor housing, so a little bit of confusion here. It doesn't logically follow on, but still a valid point. Okay, he then tries to show a bit of analysis about how the government are trying to respond to these issues, free school meals, EMA, for example. But I would have liked to have seen this link back to the question, is home background the major issue here, or is it the fact that it is in school? Okay, so at this point, I would like to have seen that debate being drawn out of the answer. Okay, in conclusion, family background may affect working class underachievement. So basically what he's doing here is summarising, he is showing awareness that there is interactions between the two. Okay. As a whole, this student has outlined a good range of different explanations of home background. Okay, he's identified speech codes, attitudes and values, a little bit about material deprivation as well. He has evaluated very briefly on 2 occasions, and then that paragraph about a bit of a juxtaposition where he goes into about the ideal pupil. Okay, because of that, this student will be roughly in the 3rd band down, which is about 18 out of 30, and I think that's roughly borderline a C grade in terms of how much knowledge is put down. What I would like to see is a little bit more skill, actually debating what the question was and developing the evaluation. Okay, thank you for listening. I do apologise if I've been waffling, but hopefully you can see what you need to include to score higher. Okay, thank you all.